All right. Well, thank you guys so much for making the time to do this. And this is a special one for me because I have so loved watching your show. I can't wait for season 2 now. And I guess just to begin for listeners, maybe Jane, can you share a little bit about the real story of your showrunner's life that sort of fed into this story that you guys are all telling?
Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist was created by Austin Winsberg, who in real life had a dad who had the disease PSP, which is progressive supranuclear palsy. And that is what Peter Gallagher's character has in season 1. And it's similar to Lou Gehrig's disease, but it out of the pain of that family experience, Austin created something beautiful, we think, which is Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist.
And I want to stick with you, Mary, for a moment, if we can, because I guess I want to really go around the horn and just understand for each of you, when this came up, what was your kind of level of experience with musical theater, with music, with theater? And I'm gonna ask everyone, but Mary, I want to start with you because in a kind of crazy way, which I'm sure you guys must have talked about, you had your own sort of Zoe moment in 2007, from what I understand, where your life changed and the role of music in your life changed. So I want to start with you, and then we'll go from there.
I did. I'll give you the fast version of it. I had a surgery on my arm in 2007, and I experienced some sort of a brain phenomena that manifested into an obsessive relationship to music that I didn't have before that. And it caused me to study music and study songwriting, and it's never gone away. I sleep a little better than I did initially, but it was just a strange thing that entered my life. But I now write for Universal Music Publishing Group, and am honored to write with some really wonderful co-writers and write for movies and TV and artists and stuff like that. But you also asked about musical theater. And this is my first musical theater experience because
Great.
I'd never sung and danced at the same time. So I'm very new at it and love it, and it's terrifying.
That's great. Amazing. And conversely, Alex and Skylar, you have both had some experience at the top of the musical theater world on Broadway. I loved, I didn't get to see Spring Awakening with Skylar, unfortunately, but I did see, and I loved Once on This Island, Alex. And I guess I just wonder if you can share a little bit beyond that, just about what you brought to this project with your experience. And maybe, yeah, Alex, if you want to start.
What I brought, I have no idea what I brought. Yay. No, but I've been doing musical theater since I was 11 or 10, and it's been my first love, and it always feels like I'm right back at home on this show, because even starting theater and then working through Glee and then coming right back to doing Broadway and then coming right back to this, it's been so much fun getting to do what I hold true to my heart. And I think that, if anything, is what I get to bring, the heart and the love of musical theater to it.
And Skylar?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have some experience in this space as well. And anytime that there's like a TV or a movie musical that I read or am being looked at for, I always try to like ask what's different about this one, and how is it earned? And I thought that this show's conceit really did that and accomplished that with Zoe's Power. And Austin wrote such likable characters that I was hooked from the get-go. Actually, before the music even started, and then from there, I was just so excited that they wanted me to do it. And of course, the stuff with Mitch, the father, really on the page right away spoke to me, and I had like an emotional reaction to the pilot, so I was in right away.
Yeah, John, I don't know about musical theater in your background. I know there's been some theater. I don't know about musical theater. And I believe also I was reminded just prepping for this, you and Jane were both on What If? So I guess that was one of the interesting things I noticed coming into this, but just singing, dancing, what was your background?
A lot of this is brand new for me. Like I've sung in passing. I wouldn't consider myself a singer. I would not have considered myself a singer before this or a dancer before this. When I read the pilot, it was very outside of my comfort zone. But similar to Skylar, similar to Alex, similar to I think all of us, the pilot resonated with me very deeply. I had a personal connection to Simon, the character who lost his father. I lost mine. And I felt like when I went into the audition space, I just thought, you know, I'm going to do my best to honor my dad. And then when I met Austin, it was this knowing the genesis of the pilot for him made me feel very deeply connected to the story. And that's why I did it.
Lauren, like Mary, we've been watching you and great stuff for a long time, but I don't know that I've ever seen you sing or dance before. Has this been a totally new thing for you as well?
No, I did Guys and Dolls on Broadway in 2000, whatever it was, I think. I will do anything to sing and dance. I will pay other people to allow me to do it. I also did like summer stock and children's theater, and yeah, a lot of my first experiences were just falling in love with musicals and listening to them on record players, guys. And Jane is a really dear friend. So when this came about, I also just thought that the show was really swinging for the fences it didn't feel like, oh, here's a show that also has music in it for no reason. It felt like a really kind of innovative way to incorporate music. And I just thought it had a really good shot of being something special, which I think it is. Definitely.
And so this Jane, I want to ask you that, you know, the thing that kind of amazed me, I'm going to let you talk about, obviously, your background with singing and dancing, but it wasn't from what I understand, super, super extensive. And B, this wasn't like apparently the kind of thing where you came in and had to do a huge dog and pony show about showing that you could sing and dance. So how did this, I mean, it's so good that it happened because it all worked out beautifully, but how did this happen?
Yeah, I feel it was pretty kismet the way that everything fell into place. I did musical theater as a kid, and because that's basically all that's available for acting when you're younger. At least in my school, we only did musicals. And so I would sing and dance because I loved acting. But I don't have any formal training in dance or singing. And I love performing, and there's nothing bigger than singing and dancing when it comes to performing. And there's someone inside of me who I think has been like waiting for this moment my whole life, just didn't know it. And when I got offered this part, there was conversations about Zoe eventually singing, but nobody had decided on that, to what extent I would be participating in the song and dance. I made a musical in 2014, which was another situation where the director just sort of crossed his fingers and hoped I could sing. I didn't have to sing as an audition. And so there was recordings of me singing. And I also sang a song on Suburgatory. And so Austin had heard me sing and was like, oh, she can carry a tune. And then it was during the pilot when I was watching all my amazingly talented co-stars perform that I was jealous. And I was like, Austin, I want to do that too. Can I partake? And he said, well, I actually have this idea for this episode where you're going to sing every single number. And I was like, please, 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 please. And then he did it. And I was scared I wasn't going to be able to pull it off. And it's like the most fun I've ever had on any project.
Well, I'm going to ask each of you about specific songs, or in that case, all 6 songs of that episode in a bit. But I just first want to sort of talk about heading into work on this one. Just what was you know, how you were able to kind of prep for what it entails. It's hard enough to make a a regular TV show. It's a long hours and all of that, but you add the singing and dancing elements. I imagine this is more demanding than probably most things you guys have encountered. And Jane, from what I had read, you had sort of, I want to ask you and Lauren, just you have a lot of scenes together, and you and Lauren, you obviously have plenty of experience at the, carrying a heavy workload of a TV series yourself. I understand there was sort of a mentor-mentee relationship here with some advice that was valuable. So I guess just I'll leave it to the two of you to share how that, what was the most valuable insight you could offer from your background.
Well, okay, here's one example. I had never heard of the term marking until Alex Newell told me what that meant. The reason I don't think I know what marking means is because I don't know how to go not 100% all the time. And so even in rehearsal, I will be like throwing my body around a room. And Lauren knows how tired I was because I was working in practically every scene for 6 months and singing and dancing. And so I would go in to do the rehearsal and Lauren would just be like screaming at me, Jane, mark it. But also just like how to manage the stress and pressure of being the lead of a show. Lauren was extremely helpful for me.
And Lauren, what did you feel that you had to kind of warn a little bit about just pacing oneself and doing, like, what for you were your biggest concerns for Jane?
I mean, it's just was such a crazy large undertaking, and Gilmore Girls was a very different show, but it had a theatricality in a way that it was just more about language and sustaining long scenes and walk and talks and just understanding sort of how to pace yourself. So it's pacing yourself, but it's also I hope that I could help Jane feel that it's such a tricky thing to talk about, that it was okay for her to stand up for herself in different ways and to say I'm at my capacity, or to say like, can this wait till tomorrow? That really that kind of lead role is you're almost, it's built in that you have to think of the whole. You have to think of the whole company and the crew, and it's important that she stays sane and healthy, and that the first year of any show is, I think, probably the hardest. And so I just hoped I could tell her it will get better. It will get, because they, as the writers develop the other characters, then it gets fleshed out and the bounty gets shared. But often in a first season, it's really about whatever the core relationships are. And so anyway, it was just really fun to be there with my friend. I was glad to be there.
Nice. Now, Mary, was it helpful to you? I know that in a very short amount of time, there was both Grace and Frankie with Peter Gallagher and this. I don't know which came first, but having gone years and years, both of you in the business without working together, now both in short amount of time, is that of any value, or is it just a whole clean slate when you show up on a new project?
Well, Grace and Frankie, in which we play exes, came first. And you're right, I went all those years and I'm not sure I'd even met Peter before. And which is weird, because when you get to my age and his age, there's this narrow search for who's going to play opposite you. And I was very lucky twice that it was Peter. And so when it came to ZOEY'S, I already knew him a little bit. And he, for all of us, was the sort of North Star of our first season. It was so interesting that someone who couldn't speak, as a character, was so profoundly loved by all of us. And we were, in the last episode when we do American Pie, I know Jane and Andrew and who plays my son, and well, all of us really were kind of a wreck because it was our first week, our first episode that Peter wasn't there. And so the feeling of loss was not, you know, it wasn't too hard to get to because we were really missing him. And we all kept saying, oh my God, he would love this shot. You know, it was such an epic shot. And Peter's takes such delight in the business still. And I love that about him. He's not, there's no part of him that phones anything in or is jaded. And he studied people that had PSP and he researched it, and he really deserves so much credit for making that so real for all of us. And not to mention his beautiful scenes with Jane, especially when, you know, the singing and dancing that I found among the most moving parts of the whole first season.
Absolutely, totally. I want to ask, speaking of dancing, just and anyone who would like to grab this one first, I'm going to ask several of you, but just the prep that goes into a musical number on this show in terms of choreography, if you can talk about now Emmy-winning ZOEY'S extraordinary playlist choreographer, Mandy Moore, and so from the dancing perspective, from the singing perspective, how much advance time do you have to prep? How is that allocated? And maybe let's start with Jane, because you certainly have plenty of it to do, and then I'd love to hear from each person.
It depends on each musical number, how much prep time we get. I am in every single number because because we watch them through my eyes. And so most of the numbers that I'm not singing in, I just learn my path on the day, which are usually not that intricate by design. It's harder to find time to rehearse with me. So I tend to have 1 to 2 rehearsals per musical number. I think some other people may do that as well, but up to maybe 4 or 5 even, depending on how grand the number is. Mandy has a team of 3. It's her and Jeff Mortensen and Jillian Myers, and I adore them, and they are some of the most creative and generous people I've ever worked with. And then, you know, we also have to pre-record these songs because we lip sync to them on set. And so there's music rehearsals, vocal coaching, and then time in the booth with Harvey Mason Jr. And this year we have Charlie Alterman. He's our music supervisor. And so a lot of prep goes into it, and yet we still shoot the same 8-day schedule as any hour-long drama, which is crazy, but we pull it off.
You certainly do. John, talking about, you know, just the pre-recording, then the lip syncing on the set, is that a challenge? Would you almost rather be singing live, or just what's that like to have to do?
I think it depends on the song. It depends on the song and what the dance is. So for example, on the pilot, when we were doing Mad World, I sang Mad World live. So, but for Happier that I did with India or Jessica in the show, we lip sung that, you know, and it depends on what the requirements are. I like the idea of lip singing at times because it means that the dancing can be more intricate in some ways. Yeah.
Interesting. And I want to ask Skylar and Alex just about the time you have and the way you use that time prepping for musical numbers on this program versus what you're accustomed to from the theater. Is it sometimes better to have a quicker turnaround, or do you yearn for more rehearsal time? What do you do in rehearsal time? Just give us your take on, as people who have done a lot in theater now doing it for the screen.
I think there are pros and cons to both, for sure. I mean, I do enjoy some of the first instinct aspect of doing it here in this way. And also, you know, so many of these numbers can't be done live because it's not even the way it would be in a Broadway musical. We shoot them for several hours and different angles, and just to even get a continuity of that sound would be a challenge in and of itself, especially if it's a lot of coverage. So it's just a different art form. And for me, as it pertains to like choreography, like Jane said, we're in incredible hands. And I just try to kind of stay open throughout that process, because I do know that it's malleable and it changes up until the moment we shoot it. And that has nothing to do with any indecisiveness. It's just because that's just kind of the puzzle and how it all works. Especially once you get in front of camera, things have to adjust. So you have to be aware. And I've had a little bit of experience knowing that you kind of have to be aware that it's going to change a bit.
Is that also your read, Alex? What's your experience?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, I'm very fortunate and so blessed that I had the Glee project, and I had Glee to train my body and mind to get choreography thrown at me right before we do the number. They've forgotten that I sing in a part of a song and then have to lip sync to the guide vocal and then go back to the studio and record that exact part exactly the way that the guide vocal sang it, because I've already filmed it. And working in theater and starting off in the ensemble and doing that work where you're picking up choreography really, really fast, and you're getting a new song and you have to learn that song because you perform it tonight, and all of that stuff. I think my brain is always in an overload kind of way, and I'm always ready for a wrench to be thrown at me for some strange, awful reason. I don't know why. I'm always like ready for it. I'm just like, yes, give it to me. But it is a whole mind, body, soul kind of thing where you just import and you spit out, and this space is so it's so the prep that we have is so important, and the prep that we do is so meticulous for the reason that they want us to be as free as we can be while filming it.
The music clearance or the music rights for this show that person must be very, very busy, because every show, these are songs that people know and love. I was wondering, Lauren, do you guys ever kind of get ahead of the writers and kind of request a song that you hope they can then integrate into the story, that, something you really feel that you can kill if you sing, or is it just take what they give you?
Just speaking to clearance, there were several times last season where, in fact, before I started, I was given a list of what my first songs would be, and they all changed. So I learned a Pat Benatar song, and then he's like, oh yeah, we couldn't get the rights. So that's something that happened last season. Skylar's much better at like thinking of songs and knowing both pop culture and classical music, but no, I wouldn't say I picked anything. I kept saying, like, the music I want to sing is not necessarily the music anyone wants to. I'm like, why more Joni Mitchell, guys? And they were like, we need stuff that's like a big, for that character anyway. You wanted things that were sort of anthem-y. And yeah, that Kesha song, TikTok, somebody had to hum it to me. I was like, how's that go? Well, I don't listen to the radio. I've never heard it. So it was fun. It was just fun to see all these, both very popular songs and then slightly ones I knew less, to see how they were interpreted. It was really fun.
Well, I'm glad you bring up TikTok, because I'm going to ask each of you about maybe your most discussed number in the season, and just ask you for, kind of a rapid fire, just any standout memories or things about the experience of doing that. So, and by the way, if I ask you about one and you think there's a more interesting story about another, go for it. But let's start with, John, people I'm sure ask you about Mad World, because that comes up multiple times in the season in different contexts. But the one that I've sort of sense the best feedback about, maybe even among your colleagues here, from what I've read, is Jealous. Can you tell us about Jealous?
Jealous was a blast, man. I felt like finally I got my feet under me. I felt more comfortable in the rehearsal space. I felt like the song suited my voice in a way that other songs maybe didn't before. It was exciting to do. I felt, this is going to be odd to say, but I felt sexy doing it. And I I was like,
We all agree.
I was like, oh man, look at me go. You know, and so I felt really good about it, and the feedback was great as well. And that was that's always a really good feeling, you know.
Nice.
And when the feedback is nice. So yeah.
Awesome. Skylar, your, I believe, first number of all of them is I Think I Love You, which comes out of the blue a bit for the characters and just all of it. What was that? Was that also the first one that you shot?
Yes, that was the first musical number I shot for sure. One kind of interesting tidbit, or this honestly speaks a lot to like Alex's wrench theory. If you notice, I kind of do a bit of a dance up the staircase in that number, and much to everyone's surprise, except the builders, they put a pole on the staircase. I was supposed to kind of dance up and down and on a zigzag, kind of doing a 360 on myself and all this stuff. And on the day, Mandy and Team Dance had to think on their feet, which then got me on my feet to kind of shift things around and do it in a slightly narrower space with uneven stairs. And, you know, we made it happen, but it definitely kept me on my toes.
Oh my gosh. Alex, how about The Great Pretender? That's very, right. That would be probably a challenge of or just an interesting one to tackle.
I legit forget that I did that song. It was pretty. I had never heard that song before. I quite literally forget that that was in that episode because my mind always goes to This Little Mind of Mine at the end of that episode.
And was that one more, I mean,
It was more that for me personally, that one was kind of the end of what my actual story is for that episode, and kind of seeing someone be authentic to themselves in their faith was lovely. And that's why I forget that The Great Pretender was in that episode. Yay.
Yeah.
And I sang it 3 times.
Mary, you have a number of different combinations of people who you're singing duets with throughout the season, and I just wonder, were one of those in particular stand out as you look back?
Well, I loved singing Perfect in the greenhouse with Peter for many reasons, one of which was it really was the only time you saw the two of us relate as two healthy people, because that's what Zoe was seeing, was her parents, how they feel about each other in their kind of healthy state. And it was also the first time I had ever sung harmony in my life. I write harmonies for other people to sing, but I had never actually sung harmony. And I knew that I was going to be I have a tendency to just keep going to wherever Peter was singing because he has such a great voice. But I learned it, and I was so proud of myself. And so that song, and just because I think it's a beautiful Ed Sheeran song, I think Perfect was one of my favorites.
Great one, absolutely. So Lauren, to come back to TikTok, do you ever imagine you'd find yourself on top of a bar singing Kesha in your life?
No, definitely not. And I will echo, I think I got there differently, but that was an interesting acting lesson for me, because that's just, everything about that song is just not how I normally see myself, or not that sort of level of confidence and exhibitionism is just like not my first, not the first way I connect to something. So I just had to kind of flip into, I had to just really act it and you know, embrace what that song is, and not be like, oh, sorry guys, this is embarrassing, not apologize within it, you know, and just sort of, I think it's like John saying, it's like, you have to feel sexy sometimes. There's just no way around it. There's no other way to kind of tell that story. So that was a really cool experience.
Absolutely. All right. So Jane, 6 songs in one episode. This is the Zoe's Extraordinary Glitch episode. Just take us back to that experience.
I was very nervous. I didn't know if I was going to be able to pull it off. We took 3 days off of production so that I could learn all of the numbers, craft them, and also record the songs. And when we finally got there, I had so much fun. I mean, I think that Zoe's gaining this power is very connected to the fact that she's losing somebody in her life. You know, I think that the power, whoever gives that to her, the universe, God, goddess, is teaching her, and through her, the audience, a lesson about hearing the melody in life. And she has to learn to hear the melody in life while she's going through the most heartbreaking, terrifying thing that, you know, arguably anyone goes through, which is losing someone. And what I loved so much about episode 8 was how, you know, it's triggered by stress relating to losing her father and finding out that really, in fact, he is going to die, and probably very soon. And especially the last song, How Do I Live Without You, I feel like is the song that's been singing in Zoe throughout the entire season 1. You know, it's like she's running around like crazy with this new power that she doesn't know how to comprehend. And she's just trying to avoid the fact that this person really is leaving. And, you know, through the power, she gets to communicate with him. And it was just such a beautifully crafted episode on every level. The director, Mandy, the music, and I'm proud of myself as well. We got to hit all the notes, you know, humor, heartbreak, sex, romance, all of it. And it was fun to be able to do that with Zoe because she's a very neurotic character. And so she's often trying to cover what she feels. She's very bad at it. And I think that's why we love her, because we're like, you're flawed. But to be able to explore the way that she really feels, which is a heart song. So I got to do that, and I got to do it with song and dance, and lucky me.
That's great. Well, so this brings us to one that is maybe the most special moment of the whole season. And I've read things where, Mary, you've said in your whole career, this might, you know, it's hard to think of something that equals this. And that is the season finale with American Pie, and just the way that each character has lines that have their own real true subtext, and the way it's done essentially in a one shot after you guys go into the house. I guess I would be curious, maybe Mary, you could start us off, and then I would love to hear from anybody who wants to speak about that, because that is a showpiece that I would put up against anything.
Well, I want to say one thing before I answer that, and it's about Mandy, and Jane and Lauren and everybody's alluded to it, but just from the perspective of somebody who knew I was going into something that was totally unfamiliar, which is choreography. And I wanted to say about Mandy that most people who've never done what we're doing would imagine that we learn these dances, and we sort of do, but the dances are born and come from Mandy out of the acting and out of the emotion. And you're not so much dancing as you are moving in the truth of the heart of your character. And it's so interesting because I think a lot of people do choreography in a very sort of a way that detaches, you know, that separates maybe the soul and the heart from the dance. But Mandy, it's all one thing. And it's just been the most fascinating honor to watch it happen for every single one of us, no matter how much experience or not that you have. She knows that we know how to give voice to that character. But as for that day, that is an example of nobody was really dancing. We just all had a place to be, and it was Peter's wake. And from the second we walk through the front door, that is I think a 7-minute or unbroken steady cam shot that our Bradley, who was our camera operator, and Emma, who was guiding him as he walked backwards through the house and filmed us, that was magical. It involved all the background people knowing exactly where they had to run to be and carrying and moving plates. If somebody watches that shot carefully, you'll see that it starts with a full table of food and then less, and then by the end of the shot, it's time has passed and the table's been cleared. I think the reason why I loved it so much is that all of life has gotten more and more solitary. We do things so much kind of alone. And this was like such a team. It was just such a team. Every single person, whether they sang or they were in front of the camera or they were the guys pulling the curtains to make it go from day to night, every single person had to make that shot happen or it didn't happen. And I always loved these guys, but I never felt closer than I did that moment, because it was so in service of this beautiful song and this beautiful moment.
And Lauren, I guess further adding to that, you guys, I think it was the last thing you shot, and you didn't know there's going to be a season 2, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Mary, you said that so beautifully, except that even the people watching at the monitor, like everyone who was there that day kind of gathered around and that contributed to this feeling of something that we're all trying to make together. It was really an embodiment of, I think, probably what many of us wanted and felt as actors starting out, is to be part of a company, to be part of a team, to be part of a story. You know, you're all there in service of the whole, in service of the story, and that just like was emblematic or symbolic or whatever of what we all, I think, were inspired by to begin with, and it was just a beautiful experience.
And you know, I guess, you know, to come back to something Mary said, that we look at things now a little differently based on the world into which your work was released. A lot of people caught up with this during the pandemic and have responded to it maybe even more than they otherwise would, because it's there for various reasons about the show. But one of the things that I think is people who love music, people who love theater, people who love musical theater, very sadly, we're not going to be getting that anytime soon again. And so what you guys are providing, I think maybe resonates with people, especially people who are who already love that kind of work, all the more, because where else are we getting it? And you guys are doing it at such a high level. So I guess if anyone has any parting thoughts about that or anything else, we're just, you know, and I guess I would again come back to Skylar and Alex, just because of your recent, you know, musical theater work yourself, if you want to say anything about that.
Well, I think something that like feels like theater, not just the fact that we do songs like Jesus Christ Superstar and even some other ones in season 2, but what the tone of our show is, and this is executed by the camera department and all the directors, and of course our executive producers, is that feeling of being in the room with Zoe and having it just kind of happen. And so many other shows in this genre, while very successful, you know, there's just a little bit more cutting, you know, obviously. And so it could even feel at times on purpose like a music video. And our show really tries to let you feel like you were there in person with Zoe, like thinking what she's thinking. And Jane does an expert job of every single reaction in every single song. So you also feel that. So I think that is something that like our show gets to be that escape. And while we can't be in a theater right now or in a venue, we're happy that we get to come into your living room and kind of give you that feeling.
Absolutely. It makes, I certainly miss this is like the, you know, a great approximation of that and great in its own right, but it definitely extra special for the time. And Alex, anything you wanted to add?
I'm the firmest believer my entire life, my love of music, is that music is a common denominator that brings everybody together. No matter if you hear a song 30 years ago and you hear it at this moment on this show, you remember what happened to you while you were hearing that song 30 years ago, and you still have a connection to a person who heard that same song 30 years ago. And our show is really about community and having this common goal of reaching out and touching people and understanding their hearts. And I love that aspect of it. It's speaking of that last number, everybody on that set, whether you were background or you were a grip or you were changing the curtain or you were lifting up the table or you were sitting there or you were in the scene, our common goal was to make something extremely beautiful and to hold it precious to us. And it's about being that community. And if we can all band together and quite literally have that goal of true happiness, even though that's never obtainable. And if we can do it through music, I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jane, I'm going to have you close this out because you all do a beautiful job, but Jane, I think, is the captain here in a way. And I want to just leave it to you to share the good news that not only will there one day be a season 2, but I believe that is a active proposition right now. This is happening.
We are all currently in Vancouver shooting season 2 of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist for you.
Great news. And
Can
so excited.
Can I add one
Please.
thing about Jane? Everybody on this show is wildly talented. They blow my mind. I actually have never been on something where I want to come in early to see people's stuff because it's so cool. But none of it would work without Jane. And it's like she has to do everything from shine wildly, which she always does in every scene, or also be the eyes through which you watch the rest of us, which is not the easiest thing to do. And it's just, none of this would work without Jane. And she's heartbreaking and funny. It's also amazing when an actor can be both of those things. And I feel really lucky to get to be on this show, but especially working with someone like her.
I don't know what to say, but I'll just say thank you.
Deal with it.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has really been fun and can't wait to see what you're working on now. So get back to work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.